Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
New data from Democrats on the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee shine fresh light on just how rough it's been for many small business contractors over the last 15 months. A new report from Senator Ed Markey, ranking member of the committee, found that since January of 2025, when President Trump took office, agencies have reduced spending by 19%, and thousands of small firms have left the federal market. For exclusive details on this new data and what it means for federal small business contractors, Federal News Network's executive editor, Jason Miller, joins me now. Jason, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Terry.
What is inside this report from the Senate Democrats about the state of small business contracting?
The numbers are fascinating because we've heard a lot of anecdotal evidence about the changes and the impact on small business contractors over the last 15 or so months. What Senator Ed Markey and his staff did was they just didn't say, okay, we're going to take those anecdotes and put a report out. They actually dug deep into publicly available data from sam.gov. They have something called a contract data report builder and pulled all kinds of information from that database and said, okay, what are we seeing around small businesses? What are agencies actually doing? Where is the money going? And based on Markey's report, it is a stark and concerning set of results here. According to Ed Markey and his team, small business contractors have seen a $47 billion reduction in terms of spending with small firms from agencies over the last 15 months. So again, since January 2025. On top of that, Terry, more than 6,500 federal small business contractors have left the federal market, according to Markey's estimates. And when you dig even deeper, it's not just small businesses at a high level. Every socioeconomic category, according to Markey's report, has felt the impact of the Trump administration's policies around federal small business contracting. I'll go through some quick numbers, and I know it's a lot here. Contract dollars for hub zone businesses, historically underutilized business zones, are down 31%. Now, we've talked a lot about 8A program. We know those dollars, both set aside and others, are down. Markey's folks found that the 8A program set aside dollars are down 29%. Contracts to women-owned small businesses, again, set aside dollars, down 24%. And even veteran and service-disabled veteran-owned small firms, which, again, the Trump administration has really put a focus on to say, hey, we should do more for veterans and service-disabled veterans, they're seeing cuts when it comes to contracting by 11%. So across the board, it's not just small business in general, but we really dig deeper into those subcategories and see everyone is feeling really the impact of some of the Trump administration policies when it comes to small business contracting.
Jason, it's not just new contracts either, but really the committee found current small businesses are also facing a tough environment.
That is so true, because what they also looked at is how many of the contracts that were terminated for convenience. We know DOGE came in and started slashing and burning a lot of contracts. About 65,000 contracts were terminated for convenience over the last 15 months. And what Markey's team found was about 60% of those 65,000 contracts terminated for convenience were held by small businesses. And again, Terry, go deeper into those numbers, it becomes even more stark. Small disadvantaged businesses held about 10,000, almost 11,000 of those contracts that have been ended by the administration. Service disabled and veteran-owned small businesses saw about 6,400 contracts terminated for convenience. So again, it really is hitting those small business contractors in a bigger way than maybe we knew about or really could imagine. And it's not so much that these contracts should have been kept just because they're held by small businesses. But I think anytime an administration comes in and says, hey, we need to relook at what we're doing, we need to take a better perspective, I think there's a lot of different policy and factors that play into those decisions. And if they're canceling a bunch of contracts that are going to impact small businesses, they have to understand that that's part of this challenge. And I think what Markey's report is showing is that sometimes the words of supporting Main Street, supporting small businesses, supporting this sector is not necessarily being translated by the actions that the Trump administration has taken. I think that's one of the highlights they're trying to point out here.
Jason, has the White House responded to this in any way, to your point about are they mixing their messages?
I've asked a couple emails both to OMB and the Small Business Administration. They have not responded yet. I've also reached out to Senator Joni Ernst, the chairwoman of the Small Business Committee, who's been a very big supporter of the administration's audits and reviews of the 8A program, expressing big concern about fraud, about waste, about lack of competition. And she also has not, her team has not responded either.
Jason, you mentioned up at the top that the total value of these contracts was $47 billion. Is that work that just didn't get done, or did it migrate somewhere else? Does the report tell us anything about that?
The report doesn't touch upon that, but when you broaden this out and you say, okay, well, maybe contracting just dropped across the board. Maybe the Trump administration came in and said, we got to be more efficient. We got to be more effective. We've got to reduce spending. There's a national debt issue. So when I looked at, okay, well, did spending drop across the board for contracting? Maybe that's can explain some of this. But recent data from the Government Accountability Office, they every year one of my favorite times of the year, put a snapshot of federal contracting out there. And this is from just this past June. And the data shows that actually contract spending in fiscal 2025 grew to $793 billion from about $755 billion in 2024. Now, GAO also found that small business contracting did drop in 2025 by about $3.7 billion to $172.6 billion. Now, I did ask the committee, well, what's the difference here? The committee found almost $47 billion in reductions to small business contracting, and GAO is saying about $3.7 billion. I'm still waiting to hear back from the committee, but my assumption here, Terry, is just looking at the data, is the committee looked at 15 months of data, so January 2025 through May 2026, while GAO just looked at fiscal year 2025, which is a much shorter time frame and also does not include this first 6, 7, 8 months of this fiscal 2026. But either way, small business contracting did drop, and whether it's $3.7 billion or $47 billion or some number in between, that obviously is showing that the Trump administration's policies are having an effect on small businesses.
Speaking of effect, then, what does Senator Markey hope this report generates?
I think there's a few things that that the committee's hoping for. Number one, I think they want to shine a light on what's happening. I think anything they can do to say, hey, pay attention to this, not just on Capitol Hill or within the government, but the broader community. They want people to rise up and kind of raise their hand and say, hey, this is a problem. In fact, they broke down the impact by state. And this was also really interesting because it's not just, a few states here and there. Out of the 55 states and U.S. territories that they looked at, so it include places like Guam and Puerto Rico and America Samoa, 48 of those were impacted by the reductions in a negative way. American Samoa, Delaware, Maine saw reductions in small business contracting by more than 40% over the last 15 months, while some of the more than a dozen states saw reductions of contracting that totaled more than $1 billion, with Virginia seeing the biggest drop by over $7.1 billion. Now, so I think that's one thing they're trying to do, say, hey, this is not just affecting some Beltway bandits, some people in the D.C. metro area, but this is impacting almost every state and territory for the U.S. government, which impacts jobs and impacts people's life. The second thing I think what Markey is trying to do is kind of push Kelly Loeffler, the administrator of SBA, to testify. The Senate Democrats and the committee wrote a letter to Loeffler saying, hey, you're the only member of the cabinet who has not agreed to testify before Congress this year, and you have not appeared before the Senate Small Business Committee in over a year. So I think this is maybe part of the way to push on her to say, hey, explain your actions, explain what's going on. I think the American people have a right to understand what your goals are, where you're heading. And then finally, I think the other piece of this is Markey is a supporter of the Rule of Two bill. This is a bill that says any contract over the simplified acquisition threshold, any micro purchase threshold, that the agency can find at least 2 qualified small businesses who can provide the service or product at a reasonable price. The contract should be set aside for a small business. That bill got through the House in May. The Senate has not picked up the companion bill, though it got introduced to the Small Business Committee last August, but it has not moved. So I think this is also Markey's way of pushing a little bit to say, hey, this is an important bill and we should move forward with it.
That's Federal News Network's executive editor, Jason Miller. Jason, thanks for bringing this report to our attention.
My pleasure, Terry.
You can find his full story at federalnewsnetwork.com.